because I just...
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay, great. All right, fantastic. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining in at lunchtime for this session. And let me start by wishing the men who are attending the session today a very happy International Men's Day. Glad to be doing this session as part of Women Who Test on International Men's Day. So we're going to leave everyone spellbound at the end of this session, and I hope I am able to leave you all spellbound as part of this session, which is going to talk about the importance of storytelling in all our lives, not only for software testers, but everyone. But how is it that software testers can use this to their advantage? Let me narrate some stories from our lives. It's a very pictorial narration. So how many of you can, resonate with this, where you feel that people are just waiting for you to go away and put in their code into whichever environments they need to put in, right? This is another story where all of us try to report the bugs in such a manner that it catches the attention of the right stakeholders. So you may have seen some of these cartoons. I've just picked it up, from an online search, but I was particularly, humored when I looked at place the bug details in a highly visible area, in your report, the bug report that you're going to be actually showcasing, so that people's eyes are on that. And then all the other elements that you need to put in there to say that, okay, fine, this is important. This is something that you all need to look at and take some action on. In terms of what is the line of command in organizations, as well as what is the line of influence, right? So line of command is very, very known to us. Of course, there are developers and there are test engineers, and then there are managers, and then there is the, the big boss, the IT director. But we also need the cleaner, the coffee maker. In the good old days when we used to go to the office, the coffee machine was the only hope for us to ensure that we keep, drinking coffee and keep testing and finding the bugs. But what is actually the line of influence? While this is a very funny picture to say that the line of influence is actually the cleaner, because without the coffee, none of us will work. Doesn't matter who is in the organization. But in reality, we also need to understand who has the influencing power. While all of us should have the influencing power, because we are testing and we are telling them, what is the kind of outcomes we have seen after testing, and hence everybody else should ideally be listening to us and taking some action. Do we really have that influencing power? Then I came across this one, which is also very familiar, right? Oh, when you are raising a bug and you're going to be telling the developer that there is this bug, what does the developer respond? And there are some options given over here. The developer says, oh, no user will take that particular option on the menu, so don't even bother. Is that familiar? We say it works on my PC, must be a problem with your PC, okay? And then of course we always talk about it as being a feature, or it worked yesterday, or that's the way it works, okay? So don't even report it as a bug. And then the lame excuse of course I fixed it yesterday, what's gone wrong again? Maybe you took the wrong version of the code or something like that. I'm sure we are all familiar with all these stories. If you're testers and if you're non-testers, you're on the other side, I'm sure you have been privy to some of these conversations. So in the chat window, I think people can put things on the chat window. I want to know, which of these stories resonates with you, and maybe there are some others that came into your mind. And why do you think people, whether you're a tester or non-tester, if you are the one who's saying this, or if you're the one who's facing this, why do you think people have these perceptions? Can I have some things on the chat window? I'm looking at the chat. Why do you think these kinds of perceptions are coming in? I don't know if anyone has put anything on the chat, because I'm not able to see the chat. Madhav, you can just help me. Karuna, you can just help me if anyone is putting anything on chat. Or are they allowed only the questions?
Even we can't see anything posted there yet. Audience, can
okay,
you...
all right. This needs to be a more interactive session. It's not going to be a tell session from my side. We are talking about storytelling, which means that, we need to hear stories from everyone. So anyone who's faced this, first let's hear that. Anyone who's faced any of this, or if you are a tester, you faced anything else in terms of responses to all the good work that you've done so far, put out a yes, I have gone through it, I've gone through something. Yes, no. You don't want me to call out names, I'm sure. Shilpa, Soumya, anybody who's gone through something? Or are you not able to use the chat window for some reason? Manikant, anyone? Okay, so I don't know if people have a challenge, or they are unable to do it, or they don't want to do it. But the point is, at the end of the day, everything is about communication, right? What are projects all about? Projects are about communication. Of course, you can have all kinds of processes in place, all kinds of reports in place, tools in place. But at the end of the day, the project or the testing or the development or whatever you do in life is about communication between people. And as George Bernard Shaw, said it so beautifully, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So here I am trying to communicate something, and I'm not sure whether it is understood in the exact manner that I am trying to say, because when I am trying to ask for some response, I'm not getting a response here. So I really want to understand whether you're getting it, and hence I'm seeking responses. But if I did not, seek those responses, if I say, okay, I have said it, I have done my bit, it is an illusion that I have that I have communicated effectively. Okay, and that's what happens all the time. So even through your bug reports, even through your stakeholder reports, whatever way in meetings where you're describing the outcomes of your testing, you are trying to communicate, and it's the assumption that you've communicated effectively. And most of the times, it has not been communicated effectively. And hence, you have the people on the other side very defensive or not buying in to what you are suggesting. And hence, stories are important. And I will narrate some stories today. All of us are familiar with user acceptance testing, one of the phases of testing of all projects. What is user acceptance testing all about? It is about getting sign-offs. Okay. So let me narrate a story of, I was newly appointed as the delivery manager for this PeopleSoft delivery team. I came from a services company and I was appointed at this client site. So it was a project which was transitioned from on-site to Bangalore. So before I was appointed as a delivery manager, they had identified the teams, they had hired them, they had trained them, the knowledge transition had happened from on-site to all these people in Bangalore. And the KPIs had been signed up to say that, Bangalore will deliver, these number of changes at this kind of quality, etc., etc. And then I was appointed. So it was a combined team. There were some people from my service company, and there were some team members from the client side. And the first release was to go out, right? So we were in almost like a agile mode, because we were doing monthly releases, and every release would have some bugs from the previous releases to be fixed and some maintenance requests which had come in. So it was a small release per month that we were doing. And because it was such a short duration, we used to do daily stand-ups to check on the status of all the items that had to go as part of the release. So there was this one particular change where the development lead used to ask the business analyst who was on this change, who was working on the change, whether she got the user acceptance sign, because multiple changes were going, right? PeopleSoft as an ERP, it will touch multiple systems and requests from so many customers and all of that. So each BA was responsible for getting sign-offs from whichever user they was going to work on or kind of do a sign-off on. So she said, yeah, of course I got the sign-off. But this guy, the development lead, every day he would ask, have you actually asked them whether it is okay for this change to be released on this particular date? So as part of a monthly release, we had a date when the release would go, right? You can't just sneak it in any time of the month. So it was anyone who wants a particular change in that month had to, ensure it comes in by that date, and we are releasing it on, say, the third Thursday of the month or something like that. Of course, there would be emergency changes, but this was the cycle. So he kept on asking every day. When she kept on saying, I got the user sign off, they are happy with the change, he kept saying, did you ask them that they are okay for this change to actually go out on this particular day? She said, yeah, I got the sign off. You got the sign off. And I realized what he was after, right? It was actually the change to an interface file. So we had made changes from our side. And if the new interface file had to kind of sync with their system, they also had to make some changes. And that change had to sync with our change and go out into production on the same day. Now, he was trying hard to get that point across, and she seemed to have gotten it. And she said, yeah, they've signed off, they've signed off. And I, from my side, to ensure that there are no questions asked later, I sent off an email to the dev lead, to the BA lead, to the business analyst saying that I understand that the user has signed off for this change to go out in production on this day. I got a response from the BA saying yes. And finally, what happened on the day it went into production, there was a severity issue because the other side did not put out their change. Now, what do you call this? A communication gap? Of course, we can always, talk about there should be change control boards, two systems, so two change control boards, they should come together, talk, etc., etc. But let's not even go there. Amongst us, somewhere, despite the fact that every day the dev lead is asking her, somewhere there was a communication gap. Either the dev lead was not able to explain or put his point across to the BA, or the BA did not understand it properly, or when she communicated it to this other system, she did not communicate it that effectively. Net, we had a severity issue. All right. Let me talk about my most, the story that I keep talking about, the Y2K problem. And I don't know how many of you are aware of the Y2K problem. Some of you may not even have been born then, if you're just freshers or interns, you don't even know what the Y2K problem was all about. So the Y2K problem was that when people were coding in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, they used to have the date field as a six-digit field. So the year component was only the 2 digits. So the century would not be part of it. So you have 88, 99, 00, 21, but you wouldn't know whether it was 1921 or 2021. Okay. People just kind of kept coding. They really didn't worry about that. But as we approached the 1990s, we realized that all those if conditions that we had in the program, so whether it was banking transactions, any kinds of transactions which were going to check for the date field, right? If YY is greater than 51, 61, 71, whatever that logic was, is obviously going to fail the minute we become 2000, because it's going to be 00, and you didn't code for that. And hence, the whole of 1990s, every organization had the Y2K project. They hired developers, they hired testers. Can you imagine the expanse of work going through every line of code to see where the date is used, what is the if condition, and changing it to have 8-digit fields and changing the entire logic and the testing that needs to be done. And these are huge mammoth systems. Well, 2000 happened, and there weren't too many issues. And again, there is a debate. People say that, oh, it was a big hype, or people will take credit that we did a fantastic job in fixing the issue. But if you were to look at who's going to take the blame for this, what created this issue, who created this issue, how did this come by? Nobody even visualized, right? The ones who were coding in the 60s and the 70s didn't visualize this system to live till 2000. And one of the theories is that those days memory was precious. You didn't have too much RAM and available. So you would have, okay, 2 digits is good enough. Let's give only that much for the year. Let's not give it 4 bytes. So these were some of the things. We are all aware of environments, right? Test environments. And story about test environment and the environment variables. So in one of the, so I was part of the integration team at one point in time in my life. And integration team will be hit by every project that happens in the organization. So I was, working for a bank at that point in time. We never have standalone systems, right? We always have systems that are interacting with each other, which means that the integration team, any small, project that happens, any small change that happens will hit the integration team, and they have to kind of do their bit of testing, and they have to provide their services. And this is the team which had those common functions, right? Whatever you call them today, we used to call them routines, common routines, where you pass something and the routine will do whatever it has to do, and it will kind of respond back to that calling function. And imagine if somebody had to make a change to this common routine, which is accessed by every possible system that the bank has. So usually there would be one person who's kind of the owner of this routine, and I've seen people who kind of were happy to live their life as developers. They really didn't want to grow into senior developer or team lead manager and all of that, so they just kind of held on to these particular programs, and they did the changes, and they also felt extremely proud about it, and they also had a big ego about it, because nobody will touch it. People will come and ask you and take your blessings before doing any kind of a change. And one of the projects that went live actually failed. There was a severity 1 issue. So I was actually not in a delivery role in that team. I was a business performance manager, which meant that I had to actually evaluate the performance of the business against many parameters. It could be operations, it could be starting from timesheets to customer to delivery metrics and all of that. So I was a neutral person in many ways. So the head of the business unit asked me to do the debrief in terms of why did this fail. A very tough thing, because this team had really stalwarts, very, very experienced people. I was new. Yeah, I have always been new in many teams, because I never stick to one team. The way I have kind of grown in my career is take up a thing which is in a mess, fix it up, and then move on to another mess. So I was sitting and trying to debrief. Nobody was willing to open their mouth. Nobody wanted to take the blame. Nobody wanted to put a finger out, say, I think this is the reason why it was caused, because ultimately it will come to the person. Finally, I found out that it was because of this particular routine, which a new version of it had come by, and everybody was aware of the new version. It was tested extensively, tested well, and all of that, and that particular version was sitting in production also. But we realized that for that new version of that common routine to execute well, there was an environment variable that had to be fixed or changed or updated. And that environment variable had been set in the pre-prod environment, but it had not been set in the production. Now, how did that happen? Because this man, who was the owner of this routine, did not follow any processes. He wouldn't care, because he was like the guru and the king there, and nobody could even tell him to follow processes, do any documentation. He was that kind. So he had somehow got access to pre-prod, put it there, done his testing, and everything worked. But since there was no documentation to support it, we didn't know that the same thing had to go into production also. And that was the story of environment variables. Now, why am I narrating all these stories, and what are you kind of taking back from all of these stories? I'm hoping for some responses. Is this resonating? Are you feeling that, oh, I was in a situation like this? This is not new. Of course, we've gone through this, and the pain because of all of this. Anybody wants to say anything? I don't know if the chat is working, questions are working. Wherever you can either put your hand out or put a message to let me know whether this is making sense. Because as I said, I don't want to have the illusion that I have communicated well and you're understanding it. Anybody? Anita?
The questions pane is available, and you can put our questions there. You can use the questions pane available.
Neha, Pushpa, Soumya, anybody wants to say anything about whatever you've heard so far? I'm trying to look at questions. Communication gap. Yes, it is a communication gap. Soumya, thank you. Of course. Does it resonate with you? Have you all been part of, situations, may not be exact, but similar situations, right? Yes. And what have we tried to do about it, right? We've tried everything from our possibility. When people are speaking, teams are sitting, team meetings are happening, everything is happening. There are processes in place, there are documents in place, there are, control boards in place, and still we go through these kinds of situations, right? What is the problem? The problem is communication, rightly said. And hence, why is it that particular business analyst did not understand the development lead despite every day in the stand-up meeting he was saying that? What was the problem? How is it that you can kind of convince? How is it that you can influence whoever, be the stakeholder, be the big boss, be the team member? And that's where storytelling comes in, right? Why storytelling? Because it is personal and it is relatable. Like I narrated stories which was very, very relatable to you all. So if you were to use the same mode of communication, it will be relatable to all the others who are listening in. The listeners are able to experience. Now, those of you who are not testers, those of you who have not been part of software industry, I don't know if there are people here, you will also be able to experience when I narrate certain stories. Right? You might be just thinking of that particular situation where this developer and the BA is standing over there and having the conversation. You might be thinking of how this big guy who owns the common routine actually sneaked in and put that particular, environment variable in the pre-prod without anyone actually seeing it. You can experience it, and these are going to be memorable. As against a session where I'm going to have on the slide 10 bullets, 50 bullets, or 50 slides, and say, this is how you do things. A new joinee joins and you're trying to induct him or her for all the processes that has to be followed in the development cycle, the testing cycle, when you're moving code into different environments. As against those bullet points, imagine if you narrated some stories to say this is why this particular form is so very important. It is important for you to fill this and only then make changes or get these approvals, however small or big it is. It's going to be memorable because of these stories. And the listener is going to be able to capture, recollect, and reproduce it. The 10 bullets, the 100 bullets, you will never remember. But the stories you'll be able to remember, you'll be able to, it will trigger, the right actions, hopefully, in you when you are in similar situations. And that's why, of course, and there's also a scientific, reasoning. I'm not the right person, to be talking about how it affects the brain, but it does say that scientifically it's proven that stories and storytelling really affect the brain in a way which no other mode of communication affects. And hence, stories are important and they are powerful, and we all need to learn the art of storytelling. So what do we need to do now? Going back to, again, why storytelling is essential. I think I've proven my point in terms of why it is essential for effective communication, but there is also a way to narrate these stories for it to have that impact. Stories have to engage the audience for sure. They have to. Like I've been narrating stories, it is lunchtime, maybe all of you are sitting with your dabbas in front of your system and you're listening to some good stories. So yes, it has engaged you. But have I been able to move you to take some action? Only then that story, in terms of a communication tool, is effective. Okay, if you come here, you had a good time, 1 to 2, and you're going back and getting into your daily routine and you've forgotten all these stories, you're not going to take any action from this, then it was not effective communication. Yeah, I told a good story, but it was not effective communication. So the storytelling has to be in such a manner that you are able to move the audience to take some action. And finally, they should be able to experience it, just not a consuming it, but a experience it. So when I'm narrating a story about the Y2K, even if you didn't live in that era, even if you're not part of that project, you should be able to experience the conversations and the kind of testing that might need to be done, the kind of thought process that is going on the nervousness that is there from the developer up to the head of technology about what will happen when it moves to year 2000. Now, you may say we'll never have a year 2000 again, but there will be a year 2100. We may not live up to that. Our systems, we don't know whether it's going to be, used till then. But with that story, if you're aware of it, I'm sure the actions that you take when you are designing, when you are coding, when you are putting out variable names, when you are testing, you might want to keep those conditions also in mind, even if today it feels that no, it will never happen. And hence, it is for yourselves in terms of how your thought process changes towards testing, towards any situation in life, also how you are able to convey and convince and influence the rest of them, be it a developer, be it a stakeholder, when you narrate those stories. So, everyone always asks me, and we are all familiar and we are always wanting frameworks. We are always wanting tools to do things. While I'm not a big fan of tools and frameworks, because I always get asked, I put a very simple thing out here. What should the story have when you are narrating it so that it does these two things? It moves the audience to action and they are able to experience it. First of all, it should talk about the problem on hand. What was the problem that you encountered, or what is it that you were trying to fix? What was the error? Okay. And then what was the journey in terms of actually reaching the solution? And then, of course, the solution. So what kind of research did you do to ensure that the solution that you brought out is going to be an effective solution? How did you go about developing your product or service? And finally, how did it change the world? How did your product or service change the industry if you're talking about an industry problem, or change the dynamics in your team if you're talking about a team issue? So largely, this can be a good framework for stories to have. Now, you can do it whichever way you want, as long as your mode touches these two aspects. You're able to move the audience to action, whoever it be. It could be, and we'll talk about when should you narrate stories. So it could be anybody, and they experience it. You can use any framework that you want. You can choose to have any elements in your story. But by and large, these are the three things that need to be there so that you are able to convey it effectively. Now, where are the resources for the storytelling? So far, so good. Maybe you bought into the idea that you have to use a storytelling mode when you come to communicate. But where are the resources, right? Where are the stories? It's your own diary. So remember, as part of project closures, you will have all those lessons learned. These are all the stories. Of course, I don't know how many of us do these project closures really in spirit. Many a times, it's always a tick mark. Okay, we have to, do a project closure. We have to have a lessons learned repository, do, some 3 things into it and move on. But this is how, a project closure and the lessons learned are going to be useful. We're talking about a Y2K problem, which we, worked in 1990s. I'm talking about it in 2021, and it may be useful to you today. And it should never be a tick in the box. I remember as part of, that PeopleSoft project that I was talking about, the monthly releases. So they had hired me. I was a non-PeopleSoft person. So they had put me into the job because I was an exceptional delivery manager. So I had put all the processes in place, and as part of every monthly sprint, we used to have a retrospection meeting to talk about, what went right, what went wrong, and why so many errors in, different stages of testing and so on. So month 1, month 2, month 3, people, did it with full josh. Month 4 onwards, it became, I could kind of predict, if this is the kind of an error, this is what they are going to talk as the reason for it, the root cause analysis. Like we look at the betting story earlier, right? The developer will say it's a feature, the developer will say it works in my system. So I exactly knew what they would come up with. And most of the time they would say it is an estimation problem, because the estimate did not cater for enough time for reviews, peer reviews, code reviews, testing, etc. They would put it back on me. saying that you have to get us more, budget, to estimate, we need to put in a few more things. Now, can you imagine, can I go back to the on-site team and say, no, our estimation model has to change, we need more time? They're going to say, same estimation model we used on-site and we've delivered release after release and we had no issues. Why does Bangalore need more time? Because this was a project we got transitioned to Bangalore. Okay, so don't make it a tick in the box activity. So these are all, your resources for storytelling. But of course, every day of your life, whether it is in the project mode, whether it is outside at home, things are happening. And as part of that, you go okay, did I lose you all for a bit?
Yes,
Okay, fine. Are you able to hear me now?
About a minute we lost you, sorry.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So I was saying that we forget things over a period of time. Okay, my webcam. Can you see me also?
We can see you. We can see you all.
Okay, all right, great. So it is important for you to reflect on a daily basis, both your
Audio has a problem.
and put it somewhere, because otherwise you will not be able to recollect all of this. And when do you narrate these stories? You don't have to wait for one big event. You do it during your weekly team meetings, you could do it at your town halls, you could do it during your one-on-one conversations with people, you could do it in your customer calls, you could do it anytime, and you need to do it anytime and every time. Like, for example, yesterday, I was part of a roundtable discussion, a closed door roundtable discussion. Of course, I was one of the participants. I was not the panelist. It was a discussion around the education system, the current education system, and parenting. And all of us had a view. Most of us will say, oh, the current education system is not the best, and I don't think it really prepares our children for the tomorrow, because we don't even know what kinds of jobs are going to exist 3 years down the line. What are the kind of skills that we are teaching in our schools and colleges? All of us have a viewpoint to say that I think this is not the way schools and colleges should be teaching students. But there was one person who asked this question. Fine. And all of us are mothers. It was all women's, kind of a panel. While we all think that this particular system is not great, does anyone here kind of, tell their children that it's okay? I mean, not to, really study too well, not to get the best of marks. Or are you still pressurizing your child, even though you know that, marks is not going to tell whether the child really is equipped to handle the world tomorrow? Are you still pressurizing your child for those marks and, to get into the best of the colleges and schools and all of that? And it was such a profound question. And everybody around the table said, yeah, we are also kind of pressurizing our children. Though we know that it's not the best way, but we still say, no, you have to study, you have to get the marks, because that is the way to be. And I narrated a story at that point in time, because when my daughter came to the 8th standard, she was in the ICSE board, and I have nothing against and for any of the education boards. It's just my personal experience. She was struggling with the ICSE. So she kind of, said that I want to be accepting. The whole school, the principal and the teachers and all her friends and the friends' parents were aghast. And they came back to us and they said that, I think you must send her to a counselor. That counselor will tell her that, no, she needs to be in the ICSE board, because that's how you kind of grow, get into the best of colleges and all of that. And today she's 19, she's, in her second year degree. And I can tell you, she can eat anyone off, whether it's from an IB board or an ICSE board, she's that good. So I narrated the story yesterday at that particular instance. I didn't go prepared with the story, but the conversation steered into this. And I was a participant, so I didn't even, need to prepare anything. But they put out a question to all the participants, and I had this available, and I narrated the story. And this probably will give some, food for thought to the other participants to say, okay, what are we trying to do? And it is not that, you have to have a unique story for every, situation. The same story, I can narrate it at another instance when probably there's a discussion going on around fitting in. A lot of people talk about, you need to fit in. So, or, do you just want to be yourself, or do you want to fit in this particular, what is the kind of dress you wear? What is the kind of, what language do you speak, or how you speak? Do you want to fit in? I can bring out the same story and say, no, we didn't fit in. As parents, we didn't fit in. We did, what our daughter wanted us to do. And she didn't fit in into, her peer community. She actually chose to move out into something else, which may not have been an accepted norm. So you can use any story in any context, the same story in different contexts, but you need to have those stories with you. So today, of course, I'm used to kind of narrating, and I do so many sessions that stories come out like this. But for you all, maybe you need to spend some time in keeping those stories, and especially during those key critical meetings, prepare and go. We all prepare for meetings, but prepare with certain stories so that you are able to get the required impact. Now, what kinds of stories can you keep in your kitty? And you can keep any and everything. And because we are talking largely to, the session is for software testers, and we're talking about being able to influence. These are some of the tips that I can give you. So stories around who am I? Now, this is also again a profound question, which we may not be able to answer, but questions around, who am I in terms of the organization view. What does this organization stand for? Okay, so every organization will have a story. Every person will have a story in terms of who you are in that structure. The future that we desire to see for our organization, for our team, for yourselves. And it may not necessarily be, because you have dreamt of it. You may have seen somebody else, reaching that point. Somebody else, some other organization, some other teams in your company, some other peers of yours, and hence you wish to have that kind of a future. And that is why you're telling your team members that they need to adapt these kind of processes. They need to be this creative when they are thinking and doing their work. There have to be stories around values, for sure, organization values, your own values. There have to be stories around change and learning, and this may be the most difficult one, but this is also the most impactful one. Okay, which are the leaders that you've really admired? What are the kind of changes that they have brought in? What are the kind of learnings that you've seen them go through? What is it that you have learned in the process? So these are just few things that I'm saying. If you didn't know where to start, what kind of stories to collect, I'm saying anything and everything needs to go into that kitty, into that bag of stories, and then you can start using them based on the context where you want to narrate them. Stories around the culture, stories around loyalty, whatever it may be. As Steve Jobs said, the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. So can we become that and leave everyone spellbound? Thank you for your time. I'll open it up for questions now, but I'm also available on LinkedIn. Happy to get connected with all of you. You can send me a note saying that you listened to me today, and hence, if you wish to remain connected with me, I would love to do that. But we have now some time for questions. Happy to take questions. I will stop sharing. Let me do it right way. Is this the one? How do I stop the share? Sharing is here. Is the share stopped?
Share is stopped. Yeah, we are just able to look at you, and we have a question here. Do you think storytelling is becoming more important now? I feel so because in the name of professionalism, we are losing the human element.
Okay, let me just come back to that. I'm just trying to get out of my own screens and get back to the GoToWebinar. And can you just repeat that question? Sorry.
Yes. Do you think storytelling is becoming more important now? I feel so because in the name of professionalism, we are losing the human element. This is from Savita.
Yeah, I think storytelling has always been important, but I think why we are focusing on it a lot these days is because we have realized that whatever we were taught in terms of the communication do's and don'ts don't seem to be, working. At the end of the day, what was taught to us as communication? Communication was supposed to be a two-way process. It was not a tell process. Communication was also about, ensuring that the other person heard it. So we were always told that you need to speak and you have to paraphrase, and then you have to ask the other person questions to ensure that they heard it right and they understood it right. And communication is also about body language, etc., etc., etc. I think this is how we were taught communication, right? But today, everyone thinks that they know more than us. That's the way the organizations are built, the teams are built. It doesn't matter what your age is, your gender is, your experience is, what kind of domain knowledge you have. Everybody thinks I know better than you, and that's our problem in terms of a developer tester relationship. The developer thinks he or she has done the best job, and the tester wants to prove that I am better than you, and see, I have found these bugs. So it is always a tussle of ego, and hence to kind of tell I'm not pointing at you. It's not the person that I'm pointing at. I'm pointing at the situation on hand, and let us see how together we are able to get out of the situation on hand, because it's going to affect you, it's going to affect me, it's going to affect the organization. It's not an individual problem. So in those retrospections, and I know that somebody said that we do retrospectives, in those retrospectives, the idea behind me is saying, please tell me what the root cause for this problem was, is only to make life better for everyone in the team, so that we don't go through the same situation again, right? That's why we want to learn from every situation. But people take it very personally. Somebody saying that the specification was not correct, the design was not correct, or the time was not enough, you did not give me a good estimate. You only want to put the blame on somebody else. So the minute you go away from that person, you go away from that situation, but you narrate a story from your life, your previous experience, or from somebody else's experience, people realize you're not talking about them. They know that you're talking about something else, and that something else created such a mess, or that something else actually brought out so many positives. And they will slowly come towards you and want to listen to you more, want to listen to your side of the story, your side of the proposal, the proposition, and why is it that they need to kind of. And I'm not saying they will buy into you just because you narrated a story, but there'll be at least some openness to listen to you. And that's where we are failing today. People already come, there is limited time, there's limited attention span, especially in the virtual world. You've got 100 windows open. So for you to ensure that you have that attention and then ultimately get their buy-in, storytelling definitely is important. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I do think the question was adequately addressed to. There are two congratulatory messages. I will go through them towards the end. There's another question. This is from Neha. Isn't it enough if we talk to the point instead of telling stories, whatever the situation it might be?
Neha, I mean, yes, I'm not saying that you need to take half an hour of that 1 hour meeting just narrating a story. But the point has to be proven, right? And people are not getting the point. And people are not getting the point for a variety of reasons. As I already told you that, there is ego around the place, and hence, they may not get the point. They think they know better. Or, your style of communication may not be, good enough to be able to prove the point. You may be trying to prove the point by putting, enough and more data around there. But people will always say, okay, fine, but this is only 5% of the cases, 95% of the cases, it doesn't happen. So, why should we spend so much of time? So your stories also have to be very crisp and concise. You cannot take the entire 1 hour of the meeting to narrate your story, but ensure that you bring it in when you have the opportunity to speak, or when you feel you really want to raise a point. Bring in that portion of the story in a very crisp, concise way, and hence it is an art. It's not going to, not everybody is able to do it that well. So, but if you have the stories with you, to start from having the material, right? You need to have the stories with you. And then for many times, when you know that these are the kind of meetings that you're going into, most of the times you will prepare. You have to go prepared. And if you know your stakeholders well enough, you will already know that, this is how the person is going to respond to, the point that I'm going to put out there. Now, for that is also a bias. That is also one of the reasons why communication is not effective. That there is, this kind of bias because of your previous experiences with those stakeholders. But here, you're going to use it to your advantage. You think that this person is going to respond like that. So before the person, responds like that, can I, narrate it in a style where he or she doesn't become defensive? So the idea is to put your point out there through that story, for sure. It has to be contextual. It has to be concise, but you will be able to meet and get the desired outcome much better. The probability of getting it is much higher when you are able to put out a story out there, because people are able to connect. Remember that slide that I said? They are able to relate to it. They may have forgotten that, but you're trying to say, you know what, in the previous project, we did the same thing. Do you remember what happened? And you narrate that story, people will be able to remember that and say, oh, really? Or, this is a new person in the team and has not had the experience of the previous project, and he or she is thinking this is the way to do things. You want to bring his or her attention to that particular aspect that happened in the previous project, because of which you believe that, this is the way you have to handle it this time. So you have to make your point, but make it with a story.
Yeah. Neha from the previous question says thank you, and we have another. It's not a question, kind of, just a piece of information, and also amazing. Totally sold on storytelling. I am in a group of educators where we are working on inventions and discoveries of scientists and their biographies through storytelling. Still, it is in the incubation phase, though. So, yeah, thank you, Aneta. And another Pushpa, I would like to thank you so much for this session. Very helpful for each and every one of us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm just I will just share my experiences, and I will look forward to any other questions that come in the interim. So I come from the marketing background, so I'm not so much into the testing here. But sometimes I have observed that when we give out the briefs to people, say for example, we need a content in a format of a image or in a video format. So it helps that what we need is important. We have to tell what we need and how, in what format, how we are expecting the process to develop and all. But however, all that said, we also need to tell them why we need it. So if the context is built on, actually, I tell the person that it is in this context that I need your creative. I need it to showcase it to these set of stakeholders. So then, even if there is a deficiency in my brief, he kind of overcomes it because he understands the context already. So when usually when we limit ourselves just to the plain brief, sometimes the error crops up because he does not get the entire context. So, and when we do like this, sometimes the creative person actually exceeds our expectations because he thinks in a different way. His interpretation of what we have said is different, and it is possible that we have something in mind which is actually different, and what he gives is actually a much better way of putting the same point forward. So yes, this is, I mean, definitely explaining why I need it. I mean, you explained it in the agile project example of yours as well. So that would help as to why exactly the person is asking that question. Not just about the information part, but to what end he needs that same information.
Right. It is everywhere. I mean, because this was a session for, the women who test community, and hence I contextualized all my stories around testing, right? I've done it for project managers, so I will contextualize around project management. I have done storytelling sessions for people who want to, answer in interviews. I have done sessions for people who want to build their own personal brand. So I will narrate stories which are contextual to that. So you have to be very clear about what is the agenda, where you're speaking, and this is the way to speak anywhere and everywhere. So if you hear Neerja speak anytime, whether it is at a session or it is in a one-on-one conversation, which could be a personal conversation also. I'm talking to my daughter and I want to kind of convey something, I will narrate some form of a story, because that is much more impactful than sitting and giving gyan to the other person. Nobody today wants gyan because everyone thinks they know better than you. So bring out in that context a story which you feel people will suddenly, see you in a different light. They will think, okay, this person has this much more experience, and I, need to kind of learn from that experience, or I need to listen to this person a bit more. Doesn't have to necessarily agree to you, but at least gives you a listen, which itself is so difficult, many of the times today. So in any conversation, you can, try storytelling. And you gave
Yeah.
a great example, Madhav. You did give a great example.
Thank you, thank you. I don't see any other questions up. I will give it one more moment. Any of the audience, if you want to have ask any question to Nija in this session, please put it on the question screen. So I will just continue with one more example of what I. In the meantime, if I have any questions, I will stop and I will read out the question. So I mean, I was as a kid, I was actually quite a reader of books, and now that we are speaking about stories, I remember this Arabian Nights actually. Arabian Nights, though actually
Right.
the gist of the story is more like a king marries a succession of women and kills them every the next morning after the marriage, and
Correct.
finally it is actually a lady who keeps on telling stories so that he has to postpone it every single time, and this happens for a span of 1001 days. So that is why it's there. So that is actually a very apt example of the power of storytelling. I mean, he actually stopped what he wanted, whatever his intentions were. He had to actually derail them. He had to defer to them because he got so excited, and he was the story that he kind of pushed it. And I don't know the ending part though, but the overall story, the origin of the story is this. So yeah, it is great. I mean, it is leave them spellbound. That is a very right example of how somebody
Yeah.
can leave somebody spellbound. And now that you speak of it, I'm just thinking about these kids books where it is all fantasy and all, but they are not unreal. I mean, you see all those flying carpets and all those things, that those things are unreal, but the emotions are not unreal. The emotions are real. The love, the hate, the bravery, the cowardice, death, all these things are also part of the same stories. So we connect to that emotion and we are able to make out from there. So I mean, it's randomly a little off the topic as in the testers community and all, but when you are speaking about the storytelling, that somehow struck me that that is an apt example of the power of storytelling. Somebody had to actually postpone his decision just for listening to stories.
So I will, probably end it, with another story. So I'm actually writing a book. So, we have, and I don't know what you will call, what category this book falls upon. People will loosely say it is self-help, because all of us, think that we have so much of experiences and we must, distribute all of this yarn to people. But the way I'm writing that book, it might be these chapters you'll find in any self-help book. So everyone talks about it. Now, how to grow in your careers. If you pick up any authors, any book, there will be, a set of 10 chapters which you will have. But my style is a little different. My style of, talking about every topic. I have topics like treat every interaction as an opportunity, or I have a topic on networking as an example. It is very important for growth in your careers. The style of, narration there is that I have picked up a story from my life, and I'm picking up a story from my daughter's life, because when I started writing it, it was for, young girls. It was, girls just stepping out of college into new jobs and all of that. But today, of course, I think that, a larger part of the population will read it. So I thought that if I narrate a story from my life, I'm 50 today, people will say, okay, it may work for you, it doesn't work for the younger lot. So I built in a story from my daughter's life, who's 19 now, but maybe stories from a school and college, and to ensure that it works regardless of age. So yesterday I was writing this chapter, and I'll narrate this story, right? I was writing a chapter on networking, and the story that I put out there is that when I get invited to all these conferences, right? So I was invited to a conference, which is a digital influencers conference. And this I'm talking about 2018. So it was an in-person conference. It was on a Sunday. So usually these conferences run for an entire day. And speakers usually will, come during their slot and, go away. But I always go for the entire conference, because for me, it is a learning opportunity as well as it's a networking opportunity. So when I was going, I told my daughter also to come along. She was 16 then, because it was a Sunday, and I thought, okay, she will learn something about digital influencing, social media and all of that. She was not on social media yet. She had just then, a few months ago, published a short story on Amazon. Okay, you can do self-publishing, right? So she had done that. So as we left, she was, printing out something, and she put it in a bag, and we went to this conference. And after every speaker finished speaking, she would go and hand out this printed thing that she had to that speaker. Now, these are influencers, they are people who have got great fan following on the digital media. And I said, what are you giving them? And she had printed out a brochure of her book. And she was giving it to them and saying that I would love for you to read my book and then put out a review comment on Amazon. I said, okay, she seems to be, doing good stuff here. And after the event was over, of course, she went back to see how many people bought her book. She saw one of the people who had come over there was the HR head of, I'm not going to name the company, but he was the HR head of one of these online delivery portals. We have so many of them today. And he's also a very famous author. So this person had actually bought the book, he had read it, and he had put a review also. So she was very thrilled. And she pulled out that review, because she's decided to use that, where this was an ebook and she was going to get a printed version. She was going to use that review then. She had also given her a business card. I pulled out the business card, I took his number, and I put it in my phone. Fast forward to 2020, the minute March came, the calamity, the lockdowns, no online portals were able to deliver food, groceries, etc. I remembered this person, and I picked out his number, and I messaged him, and I said, whatever my problem was with the portal. And to introduce myself, I said, we had met at that particular conference. He said, he answered, whatever challenges I was going through on that online portal. And then towards the end, he said, of course, I remember you. Your daughter writes beautifully. Okay. And I told my daughter that. She was maha thrilled. And I was happy that because of the connect that I got on that day, today, when I was in this challenging position, I'm able to connect with him and get something resolved. And that is the power of networking. So now imagine if I'm going to start a chapter with this story, the impact it is going to have. From where am I tying to what? It is my daughter doing something, but I also, kind of got benefited. And the power of networking goes beyond professional stuff. It goes, into your personal arena also. But if I sit and say, networking is important, you got to network, you got to meet people, you have to attend conferences, you have to take business cards, nobody's going to, really, like it, because so many people shy away from that. But if I were to give this story and say, this is why networking is important, this is how you network, all right? People say, yeah, I think it's a good thing. So storytelling can be used anywhere and everywhere. And that's why, to Neha's point also, don't think it is to the point. It is at the end of the day, you have to ensure that you have your audience's attention. And how do you get your audience's attention, be it at home or be it at work or be it in the larger community? And storytelling is a way to leave them spellbound. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirjat. They are a little. There's one more question. Would you like to take it, or shall we call it?
Please, we can take it. We can definitely take it.
No, I was requesting it because this could be of use for many people. So this is a PG student, Ritik, and he is asking for some tips to be as a part of interview actually. So in a course of interview, how you can use storytelling skills. That is what his question is about.
Right. So what you will see is when you're going for interviews, usually you will have the job description of the job. What is the kind of a job for which you're going to, going for the interview. It will be there. At least some 3-4 lines will be there that this job needs these kinds of skills. This is the kind of work you will be expected to do. That's what is called as a job description. You have already seen some of them. So you have to identify those particular skill areas, the competency areas which they are wanting from the candidate. And you bring in stories from your life where you have exhibited those competency areas. Now, it's a great thing to say, you know what, I'm a fantastic problem solver, because every organization needs, problem solving skills. Yeah, I solve problems fantastically. You can say that, but every other person will claim to be a great problem solver. But instead, if you were able to narrate a story from wherever, your student life, your voluntary work, your internship, or you're at home, there was a crisis, how did you manage to bring in your creativity and solve that problem? If you narrate that story and say, that's why I believe I'm the right candidate for you in this role, because problem solving skills are a must for this role, they will know that yes, you have that ability. So bring in those stories based on the skill set, not the technical skill sets, of course, those are something, but even in the technical skill sets, you may not be 100% there, right? You may not have all the technical skill sets, but you want to tell them that you are a great learner. You are, your learning agility is really fantastic. Bring out a story of how you were in a situation which needed a particular skill which you didn't have, and how you quickly kind of learned by, going through books, going through Google, going through whatever, and you're still able to deliver to that. So identify those competencies and bring out those stories, and that's why you should go prepared. Find out what the job description is, find out what competencies they are after, and look at your past, what stories you will narrate for those most important competencies, and when questions around that come, ensure that you go ahead with those stories. And the other part is also your elevator pitch. When they ask you a question, tell me something about yourself. Don't sit and say, okay, I have so many years of experience for anybody else here, or I'm a student, and all of that. It has to be in a story mode to say, why is it that you are the right candidate? In those 30 seconds, the person has to actually you should be able to grab that person's attention to say, I want to listen to this person more. Of course, elevator pitch itself is a session by itself. Someday maybe we can talk about it. But if you go to my LinkedIn, I've done so many webinars on a variety of topics. You can actually go through all of that. You may be able to get more insights.
Okay, I think that ends it. That was a great session. We had a lot of questions. So thank you, Nirja. It was great to have you at our Women Who Test Forum. I am pretty sure all the tips and knowledge that you have provided would be leveraged by the audience in their respective work areas. And I would definitely like to avail the opportunity that you set off another webinar, which is of having an elevator pitch. Maybe I will invite you for another webinar at Women Who Test sometime later. Yeah, definitely, I would also like to thank the audience for active participation in this. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to interact with them through Women Who Test. Looking forward to interacting more, either through LinkedIn or through another session. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.